On November 15, 1997, in Kings Mills, Ohio, a baby was born to Doug and Carla Alcorn. They named their child Joshua Ryan Alcorn. Like many parents, they had hopes and dreams for their child's future. But no one could have predicted how this young person's life would touch millions and help spark important changes in society. Growing up in Kings Mills, a small suburban community about 25 miles northeast of Cincinnati, Josh seemed like any other kid at first. The Alcorns were a religious Christian family who attended church regularly and were active in their community. They lived in a modest home, and Josh had 2 siblings. But from a very young age, Josh felt different. Later, in personal writings, Leela, as she would later identify herself, would describe feeling like a girl trapped in a boy's body from around age 4. At that young age, she didn't have the words to explain these feelings, but she knew something wasn't matching up between how she felt inside and how the world saw her. Elementary school years were confusing. While other boys wanted to play sports and rough games, Josh preferred activities that were typically associated with girls. But in a conservative Christian household, there wasn't much room for questioning gender roles. Around age 14, Josh discovered the term transgender. While browsing the internet, it was like a light bulb going off. Finally, there was a word that described those deep, persistent feelings of being different. Through online communities and resources, Josh learned about other people who had similar experiences. This discovery brought both relief and new anxiety. Relief because there was finally an explanation for those feelings of disconnection from the male identity everyone expected. Anxiety because Josh knew that coming out as transgender would be incredibly difficult, especially given the family's religious beliefs. At age 14, Josh gathered the courage to tell their mother about these feelings. "I'm transgender," Josh said, explaining that they felt like a girl inside and wanted to live as their true self. The response was not what they had hoped for. Carla Alcorn was shocked and upset. She viewed this as a phase or possibly the influence of the internet and secular society. Instead of accepting her child's identity, she turned to their church for guidance. This led to Christian counseling sessions aimed at correcting these feelings. The counseling sessions were difficult. Rather than helping Josh understand and accept these feelings, the focus was on suppressing them. The message was clear: these feelings were wrong, sinful, and needed to be overcome through prayer and faith. At Kings Mills High School, Josh tried to blend in while struggling with an increasing sense of depression and isolation. On the surface, things looked normal. Josh maintained decent grades and didn't cause trouble. But inside, there was a growing storm. Some classmates noticed that Josh seemed different from other boys, leading to occasional bullying and social isolation. While there were some supportive friends, many kept their distance, picking up on the subtle signs that Josh didn't fit typical gender expectations. The internet became both a refuge and a source of pain. Online, Josh could be herself, using female pronouns and the name Leela in some spaces. But seeing others living authentically while feeling trapped in the wrong identity made the pain of her situation more acute. Despite her parents' disapproval and the therapy sessions, Leela, as she now thought of herself, became more certain of her identity. She began secretly expressing herself as female online, finding communities of other transgender teens who understood what she was going through. The name Leela was chosen with care. She later wrote that she wanted a unique name that felt true to who she was. Online, she could be Leela, her real self, even if she had to continue living as Josh in the physical world. As Leela entered her mid-teens, the disconnect between her inner identity and outer life grew more painful. Her parents' response to her coming out had been to restrict her internet access, believing that online influences were corrupting their child. They took away her phone and limited her social media access, cutting her off from the supportive communities she had found. In 2013, at age 16, Leela was sent to conversion therapy. This controversial practice attempts to change a person's gender identity or sexual orientation through counseling and religious intervention. The therapist told her that she was selfish and wrong, that she was hurting her family by insisting on being transgender. The sessions were traumatic. Instead of helping, they deepened Leela's depression and sense of isolation. She later wrote in her suicide note, "I only got more Christians telling me that I was selfish and wrong and that I should look to God for help." The atmosphere at home became increasingly tense. Leela's parents insisted on using her birth name and male pronouns. They told her that God doesn't make mistakes and that she was born a boy for a reason. Clothes, makeup, and anything associated with feminine expression were strictly forbidden. Leela wrote in her diary about feeling like a prisoner in her own home. She wasn't allowed to have friends over unless they were approved by her parents, and she wasn't permitted to go out much except for school and church activities. At Kings Mills High School, Leela tried to maintain a facade of normalcy while dealing with intense internal struggles. Some teachers noticed she seemed withdrawn, but the strict atmosphere at home made it difficult for her to confide in anyone about what she was going through. A few close friends knew parts of her story, but the fear of rejection and the restrictions placed on her social life made it hard to maintain deep friendships. She felt increasingly isolated, watching other teenagers enjoy normal social lives, while she felt trapped in a life that didn't feel like her own. Despite the negative response to her first attempt to come out, Leela tried again. This time, she was better informed and had more words to explain her feelings. She told her parents about the depression and anxiety she was experiencing, hoping they would understand the toll their rejection was taking. The response was similar to the first time. Her parents insisted it was just a phase and doubled down on religious counseling. They told her she was too young to know what she wanted and that these feelings would pass with time and prayer. Despite the restrictions, Leela found small ways to express her true identity. She grew her hair longer, though her parents frequently insisted she cut it. She practiced feminine mannerisms when alone in her room. In private moments, she would write about her dreams of transitioning and living authentically. Online, during the brief periods she could access the internet, she connected with other transgender teens and allies. These connections were lifelines, reminding her that she wasn't alone and that there were people who would accept her for who she was. The combination of conversion therapy, family rejection, and social isolation took a heavy toll on Leela's mental health. She struggled with depression, anxiety, and feelings of hopelessness. The few outlets she had for expressing her true self weren't enough to counteract the daily pain of living as someone she wasn't. Despite the challenges, Leela had dreams. She wanted to be an artist and had talent for drawing. She imagined a future where she could live as herself, perhaps in a more accepting city, surrounded by people who would love her for who she was. She researched transgender healthcare and transition options, though she knew her parents wouldn't support or allow medical transition while she was under their care. She planned to leave home after turning 18, hoping to start her life over somewhere she could be herself. As 2014 began, Leela's struggles intensified. She was now 17, in her senior year of high school, and facing increasing pressure to conform to her parents' expectations. The promise of freedom at 18 seemed both tantalizingly close and impossibly far away. Though struggling emotionally, Leela maintained good grades. Her parents had made it clear that college was expected, but their vision of her future didn't align with her own. They talked about Christian colleges and careers that fit their idea of who their child should be, while Leela dreamed of art school and a life where she could be herself. In the summer of 2014, Leela got a job at Kings Island Amusement Park. This job represented a small taste of freedom and independence. She earned her own money and had some interaction with the world outside her restricted home life. However, the job also highlighted the painful contrast between her reality and her desires. She had to present as male at work, using her birth name and wearing male uniform items. Still, the paycheck represented hope. Maybe she could save enough to start her independent life after graduation. Despite the restrictions on her social life, Leela had managed to maintain some friendships. A few close friends knew her true identity and tried to offer support, though their ability to help was limited by her parents' strict rules. Online, during whatever moments she could get internet access, she shared her struggles on Tumblr and other platforms. Her posts revealed both her pain and her desire to help others in similar situations. She wrote about the importance of acceptance and understanding for transgender youth. While Leela had been raised in a deeply religious household, her experiences with conversion therapy and religious rejection led her to question and ultimately break with her family's faith. This created another layer of separation between her and her parents, who saw her rejection of their religious beliefs as another sign she was going down the wrong path. As her body continued to develop in ways that didn't match her identity, Leela's gender dysphoria, the distress caused by the mismatch between gender identity and physical characteristics, became more intense. Without access to hormone therapy or other gender-affirming care, she felt increasingly trapped in a body that felt wrong to her. December 2014 brought additional stress. The holiday season meant more family gatherings where she had to present as male, more religious services that denied her identity, and more reminders of the gulf between her reality and her dreams. In the days leading up to her death, Leela scheduled several posts on Tumblr. The most important was her suicide note, which she set to publish after her death. She wanted her story to be told, hoping it might help prevent other transgender teens from experiencing the same pain she had endured. On December 28, 2014, around 2:20 a.m., Leela walked from her house to Interstate 71 near Kings Mills. She had left a brief note in her room saying, "I've gone for a walk. I'll be back. Please don't look for me." Her parents would later say they thought she was just clearing her head after a disagreement. In the early morning darkness of December 28th, Leela stepped in front of a tractor trailer on I-71. The driver couldn't stop in time. She died instantly. The driver, who was deeply traumatized by the incident, would later say he initially thought he had hit a deer until he stopped and realized the tragic truth. News of the tragedy spread quickly through Kings Mills and the surrounding communities. Initially, local media reported it as a pedestrian death, using Leela's birth name and male pronouns. But within hours, everything would change. At 5:30 p.m. on December 28th, Leela's scheduled Tumblr post went live. Titled "Suicide Note," it began with the words, "If you are reading this, it means that I have committed suicide and obviously failed to delete this post from my queue." The note was raw, honest, and heartbreaking. In it, Leela explained her struggles, her pain, and her hopes that her death might mean something. She wrote about her experiences with rejection, conversion therapy, and the isolation she felt. She ended with a plea for parents to accept their transgender children. "The only way I will rest in peace is if one day transgender people aren't treated the way I was," she wrote. "They're treated like humans, with valid feelings and human rights. Gender needs to be taught about in schools, the earlier the better. My death needs to mean something." Within days, Leela's story had gone viral. Major news outlets picked up the story. LGBTQ+ activists, celebrities, and ordinary people around the world shared her story and her final message. The hashtag Leela Alcorn trended on social media platforms. Her death sparked intense discussions about transgender rights, conversion therapy, parental acceptance, and mental health support for LGBTQ+ youth. People who had never thought about these issues before were suddenly confronting them through the lens of this tragic story. Leela's parents initially continued to use her birth name and male pronouns in public statements. Her mother told reporters, "We loved him unconditionally. We loved him no matter what. I loved my son. People need to know that I loved him. He was a good kid, a good boy." This response only fueled more discussion about the impact of family rejection on transgender youth. Many pointed out that continuing to deny Leela's identity even after her death exemplified the very issues she had written about in her final note. The local community in Kings Mills was deeply affected. Students at Kings Mills High School organized memorials. Some teachers and students who had known Leela but hadn't understood her struggles now faced difficult questions about what they might have missed or how they might have helped. The Kings Island amusement park, where Leela had worked, established new training protocols for supporting LGBTQ+ employees. Local LGBTQ+ support groups reported increased calls from both young people seeking help and parents wanting to better understand and support their children. Mental health professionals and LGBTQ+ organizations used Leela's story to highlight the dangers of conversion therapy and the importance of supporting transgender youth. Statistics showing the high rates of suicide attempts among transgender teens who face family rejection became part of the national conversation. The American Academy of Pediatrics and other medical organizations released statements reinforcing their opposition to conversion therapy and emphasizing the importance of supporting transgender youth with appropriate medical and mental health care. In the months following Leela's death, activists began pushing for Leela's Law, which would ban conversion therapy. While a federal ban wasn't achieved, her story helped fuel successful efforts to ban the practice in various states and cities. Cincinnati became one of the first cities to ban conversion therapy in December 2015, exactly 1 year after Leela's death. The ban carried a $200 per day fine for mental health professionals practicing conversion therapy on minors. As months and years passed, Leela's story continued to influence change across America and beyond. Her final wish that her death would mean something began to come true in ways she might never have imagined. By 2024, 20 states and numerous cities had banned conversion therapy for minors. These bans, many directly inspired by Leela's story, protect thousands of young people from experiencing the harmful practice she endured. Schools began implementing better policies for supporting transgender students. Many districts developed guidelines for names and pronouns, bathroom access, and protecting student privacy. Training programs for teachers and staff often included Leela's story as an example of why such policies matter. Medical organizations strengthened their support for gender-affirming care. Insurance companies began expanding coverage for transgender healthcare. Hospitals and clinics developed better protocols for treating transgender patients with respect and understanding. The American Psychological Association and similar organizations further emphasized the harm of conversion therapy and the importance of accepting and supporting transgender individuals, particularly youth. Leela's story influenced how media outlets cover transgender issues. Many publications developed guidelines about using correct names and pronouns. Stories about transgender people became more nuanced and respectful, moving beyond sensationalism to focus on real issues affecting the community. Online, Leela's Tumblr became a sort of digital memorial. Though her original blog was eventually taken down at her parents' request, copies of her final messages continue to circulate, touching new readers and inspiring continued activism. LGBTQ+ support organizations reported increased donations and volunteer participation following Leela's death. New organizations formed specifically to help transgender youth and their families. Support groups for parents of transgender children expanded, helping families avoid the mistakes that contributed to Leela's tragedy. The Trevor Project, a suicide prevention organization for LGBTQ+ youth, created new training materials incorporating lessons learned from Leela's story. They expanded their services to better reach transgender youth in crisis. Schools and universities began including Leela's story in discussions about bullying, mental health, and LGBTQ+ issues. Her story became part of training materials for counselors, teachers, and healthcare providers. Perhaps most importantly, Leela's story helped change hearts and minds. Parents of transgender children often cite her story as something that helped them understand the importance of acceptance. Young transgender people found courage in her final message to live authentically and fight for change. Despite the progress made since Leela's death, challenges remain. Many transgender youth still face family rejection, discrimination, and lack of access to appropriate health care. Conversion therapy remains legal in many places. Suicide rates among transgender youth remain tragically high, but there is hope. Each year brings new progress in rights, acceptance, and understanding. More parents choose acceptance over rejection. More young people feel safe coming out. More communities provide support and resources. Leela Alcorn lived only 17 years, but her impact continues to grow. Her final wish that her death would mean something has been fulfilled in ways both large and small. Laws have changed. Lives have been saved. Hearts have opened. In her suicide note, Leela wrote, "Fix society, please." While society isn't yet fixed, her story has helped push it in a better direction. Each person who reads her story and chooses acceptance over rejection, understanding over fear, or love over prejudice helps fulfill her final wish. Every December 28th, people around the world remember Leela. They light candles, share her story, and recommit themselves to creating a world where no young person feels so alone and hopeless that suicide seems like the only option. Leela's final message to parents remains powerful. The only way I will rest in peace is if one day transgender people aren't treated the way I was. My death needs to mean something. My death needs to be counted in the number of transgender people who commit suicide this year. I want someone to look at that number and say that's fucked up and fix it. Fix society, please. These words continue to inspire change, push for progress, and remind us all of the vital importance of acceptance, understanding, and love. While Leela Alcorn's life was tragically short, her legacy lives on in every life saved by the changes her story inspired, in every law passed to protect transgender youth, and in every parent who chooses to accept and support their transgender child. In the end, Leela's story is not just about tragedy, it's about transformation. It's about how one young person's pain and courage helped spark changes that continue to save lives and create hope for a better future. While we can't change her story's beginning or middle, we can honor her memory by continuing to work toward the better world she dreamed of, where every transgender person is treated with dignity, respect, and love. This is Leela Alcorn's legacy. Not just a story of loss, but a catalyst for change that continues to transform lives and society for the better.